Okay, good afternoon, board. Tonight, we're going to talk about the first quarter financials. This is just a brief overview of some of the highlights of it. And then towards the end, we'll talk about the bottom line, and we'll transition a little bit from the capital projects, update from the end of last year, and then transition into the capital projects for the coming year and the first quarter. At the end of the first quarter, we had $27.6 million of district funds. Most of that is in our general revenue account, which is $16.8 million. System development fund of $8.3 million is used for capacity and project enhancement, district-wide enhancements. And then debt service fund, we have $2.6 million to pay for upcoming debt service payments. On June 1st, we owe $1.4 million, and in July, we have another $1.2 million of debt service. So most of our debt service is paid in those two payments in the middle of the year. We invest our funds with the state local government in an investment program. The state runs a short-term, 1 year or less investment pool for municipal governments. It tracks closely and benchmarks to the 2-year treasury. You can see it lags behind. The blue line is our returns. We went from about January of 2025 at 4.5% to last year we earned 3.7% on our $23 million that we have invested with the state. It's a good, stable investment pool that we can put money in and take money out as we need it without any restrictions. New meters, you can see for the first 3 months of the year, we sold 25 new meters or services. January was our biggest month. We had 14. It's pretty average for the first quarter compared to the prior years. Last year, we did 20 during the first quarter, and the year before that, we did 31. So you can see we're trending pretty close to average for new meters. Hopefully this will pick up a little bit. Last year we did 120 new services for the entire year. So later in the year, March, April, May, and to the summer, we usually sell a few more meters. Consumption comparison for the last 4 years by month. Just wanted to put this up here to show we're trending from last year down 4.3% from prior year. February and March in particular are much lower months than typical and average. And then I put up 2023 on there. 2023 was our last high consumption year, higher than average, I should say. And January was very high, but that was attributed to the freeze that we had, people leaving their water on to prevent pipe freezing. And so we had some leaks during that time period too. So we'll be watching this going forward. Hopefully consumption will pick up a little bit more. It's dry, and so the typical weather pattern will apply. Translates into water sales of $7.8 million for the quarter. You can see that residential and multifamily is the largest category and up 5%. That's good. Resale is also up so far for the first quarter, about 18%, and the other two are below, but all 4 categories are trending well to the budget. We're about 104% of budget for seasonality, so continue to monitor that. Operating expenses were $5.2 million for the first quarter. The largest category is salaries and benefits. That's up 6%. The water treatment plant, water, power, and chemicals is down 7%. That's mainly because we haven't turned on the pumps through March. We have 3 pumps running, I believe, Mike, to fill the Judy Reservoir now in April. We want to fill that up as much as we can before the dry weather. We did a new project last year, and we have a actuator, a remote valve sensor on the creek, and so we were able to pull more water out of the creek and take advantage of all the rain that we've had this first quarter. Repairs and professional services are both down by category. This has to do more with the timing of the projects. As we go through the year, there'll be more projects that will capitalized and put into the category. And then tech SCADA support, that's ahead of budget so far this year, but a lot of those are annualized costs that we pay for software in the first quarter and second quarter of the year. So that number should trend down compared to the budget for the rest of the year. The other one I'll point out is goods and services. It's up 26%, mainly due to utility costs, costs for this new building, and then also insurance costs. So we've added some costs to that, but also just utilities in general are going up. Paying taxes on a lot of services that weren't taxed before due to the changes in the tax code. And then construction in progress is a negative number. That's the amount that we are capitalizing from our operations into the capital project. So for the first quarter, a lot of engineers and construction maintenance and out in the field personnel were working on capitalized costs instead of just maintenance costs, and we're able to capitalize those. So overall, 3% ahead of last year, but 97% of budget. So we're trending well compared to what we budgeted for the year. Capital contributions is another revenue source made up of work orders. That's work that the PUD does for other entities and are paid for. It's really flashing. It's hard to pay attention up there, sorry. Donated plant is developer projects where they install improvements that then are donated to the district for us to maintain and operate going forward. System development fees are paid for new services and hookups to the district infrastructure, and services go along with that for hookups, new hookups. So you can see we're trending down from budget, which is almost $680,000. We've done 373,000 year to date, but this varies widely quarter to quarter just based on donated plant and other projects. So the high was in 2024 where we did almost $1 million in the first quarter, largely due to the donated plant there. And then last year we were at 300,000. So we're trending pretty well. It just varies a lot depending on when projects are done. Quick summary of the cash flow. Most of these were covered before. Total revenues are up 2% over last year. Operating expenses, we talked about 3%, but debt service is just according to schedule. We don't have any new debt and it's down slightly from the prior year. We have positive income right now for the first quarter of $1.2 million. It added to our reserves. So last year at this time we had $24 million. At the end of the year in 2025, we had $26 million. So we've added just over $1.25 million of reserves to our. There we go. All right, now I'll transition. This is a little bit of the capital improvement plan. And since I spoke in January for the end of the year, we now have finalized our numbers. I'm getting ready to submit the financial statements to the state, but we closed out the year in the beginning of April for all of the expenses as contractors, vendors, construction projects are closed out. So we ended the year at $10.5 million in capital improvements in 2025. We had budgeted $15 million, so we came in under budget, and that's mainly for two projects. We have the generator at the water treatment plant that we put on hold last year when we applied for a grant. So we're waiting to hear back from a grant, and we didn't want to have any more expenses until we know if the grant is accepted or not, because it'll go from that period forward. So we put that project on hold. And then also the I-5 Fishwater Passageway, it's a WashDOT project that we also have to move our pipes for, is taken longer, and that's a WashDOT project. So those two projects is about $4 million that didn't get spent in 2025 that we will be spending in 2026 and 2027. So it's just slowed that down and pushed them out. But you can see the blue up here. This is actual capital improvements. We've done over $25 million of capital improvements from 22, 23, and 24. It was a planned reduction from that large capital improvement plan to a more moderate, I'll say. And then 2025 budget is in the orangish color up there. And that was what we had budgeted in 2025. And now in 2026, It's just the same projects, but pushed out a little bit, and the expenses are changed a little bit from which year they happened in, but it's approximately the same one. So we have one big project in 26, 27, 28, which is the Panorama Tank project. And again, that's moving forward. We'll talk about that in a little bit more. And then also the disinfection system replacement for our water treatment plant. Those are the two biggest projects coming up. So now a little bit more on the capital projects for the first quarter. We've spent $830,000 through March 31st. You can see by category up there that the pipe replacement, we spent $236,000. Developer projects was the next largest at 208, and then operations, maintenance, and major capital projects, a big category for 185,000. We have many projects going on, various sizes. Some of the project names, specific names for the pipe replacement projects are up there on the right, and then the larger development projects that finished during the first quarter. And then down below is the operation and maintenance projects. So the disinfection study, which I just mentioned, that's, we spent $82,000. And again, this is just for the first quarter. So there was money spent before that, and there'll be money after, but that's for the first quarter so we can track it. We're working on the old admin building across the parking lot, and then the water treatment plant, electrical panels, and so on. And then this slide is our attempt to talk about the CIP projects in a slightly different way. So during the budget cycle last September, October, November, all of these projects were discussed and approved into the coming years for the CIP projects. But we talked about very specifically the cost, the estimated cost at that time to complete the projects, and that's the number up there in the second column. And these are the major capital projects that we'll be talking about each quarter, and also as the engineering makes their presentations too. But it's an attempt to just keep you informed of those projects as we go. Again, it's just 2026 expenses so far in one quarter, and that's why the numbers in the first column are relatively small. And then you see the estimated cost to complete. And then that's the percent complete, so that'll actually track as we go from quarter to quarter. And then the completion year. So the top three projects there are scheduled to be completed this year. So all of those should be done and scheduled and completed. And then the next projects are either done in 27 and or 28. So those will be long-term projects that we will track, and we'll keep coming back and saying the status of those as they progress. The Hillcrest pipe replacement project is up there. It was scheduled to be underway here, and we are negotiating with the city. So at this point, that's been postponed a little bit as we work out some of the differences there. So that has an asterisk on it, but that's what we're going to plan on doing. And so if there's questions, I'm happy to take those now.
Quick question. I know it says year to date. I know that some of these projects have been going on for multi-year, especially the Panorama Tank, and we have previous expenses. And so we kind of are deciding to reset the clock as far as this table is concerned with the year to date for 2026. And then how much to completion? Is that to completion based on how we have it budgeted in the CIP?
As we discussed last budget cycle. So that's the moment in time going forward, and then it'll be updated as we go. But right now so that's why there's 16.5 there, but it's only like, I think $1 million for this year's budget. And then all the rest of that is out beyond that for Panorama. So that will be a long-term project. So.
Gotcha.
So, all right. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, so we now will move into some audience comments. If you would like to take your 3 minutes coming up to the podium here, ask you to keep your comments to approximately 3 minutes.
Names would be helpful.
And names, yes. Mike, man, who needs no introduction, except for Tony. You're gonna get a punch card for.
Yeah, do I get like a cup of coffee after 10?
We'll get you. Yeah, yeah.
No, okay. Tony Wisdom, Skagit Valley Farm. Good afternoon. here to just express again and repetitively the gratitude that the agriculture community has to the PUD for the support that is shown through the seasonal transfers over the last several years. The extra water gained through the seasonal transfers has proven to be in some ways life-saving to many of our community members, and I think that cannot go unrecognized. Sometimes the difference between having a little extra water at the end of the summer will push your crop over the finish line, and that can be a make or break year for a farmer in Skagit County. I know that you received many emails that came in from the ag community, and I wanted to just make sure and highlight that, as you can imagine, today is a rather difficult day to get farmers to come to a 4:30 meeting when we're all in full on go mode. So we recognize that that might be the case. And so there was an attempt to provide some guidance on getting some email communication in lieu of being able to show up in person. It's possible that the language that was used by some people was in no way meant to be nefarious or misguided and say something that it wasn't. The point of the effort and communication is simply to say that the ag community, and I'm not speaking for anyone else here today, I'm just speaking for myself, but I did send an email, and I know there were other emails sent, but the point of the communication was simply to say that we understand that the primary goal of the PUD is to service your pipe customers. Like, that's an obvious given. What we're hoping for is significant continued effort to support the ag community through whatever water is left through an unpiped process. And we realize that's sort of what you have to deal with now, is trying to figure out a good policy that would hopefully support that and any other things that you might consider as part of that. So again, the goal was to just communicate our support and gratitude for the commissioners and for what you're trying to do. It's a big lift. It's a interesting project that you got to figure out on the policy side, but we're grateful for that. We're grateful for the PUD staff for the time and effort that it takes on your part to work between and be the go-between sometimes between all the groups, and we're just grateful for that. So thank you.
Other comments in the audience? Great. If you're online, I'm thinking stuff. All right, then we will close the, oh, nope, come on up. No, that's for our discussion.
Yeah, that's just in our packet, the community.
So the
public
emails that
comments,
came
those are
in.
the emails that came in.
Yeah, so if you got something to say, now it's time to say it.
There won't be
Thank
an
you.
opportunity later.
Yeah, there won't be another opportunity.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you
please.
so much,
Yeah.
commissioners, for having all of us today. My name is Michaela Staples Hughes. I'm here today on behalf, as the president of the Western Washington Agricultural Association, also the vice president of Sakuma Brothers Farms and Processing there in Burlington. Again, just to echo some of Tony's comments, where the agricultural community is really appreciative of what PUD has done the last few years with the pilot program. And again, on behalf of producers throughout the county, you know, the county is strong because we have a strong agricultural base. And without that base, if certain growers lack the water that they need, that really can affect that whole base. And our county is so reliant on our agricultural economy. It's part of the fabric of our county, and it's something that we all hold very dear. And so again, appreciate your considerate and really thoughtful approach here in addressing the water program, and hope that agriculture can continue to be prioritized in future use as you consider how the program advances forward. So thank you again for all your work, and hoping that agriculture still remains, you know, at top of mind when you're moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, good afternoon. My name is John Rusin, and I live at 16031 Allen Road. And when I talk of we, I do not have permission to talk about with 4 other people. So just think of me when I say we as me and the mouse in my pocket. And I want to start, it's hard to do any of this in 3 minutes, but I want to start going back a little bit in time, that Washington became a state in 1889. And at that point in time, water rights started transferring and learning from other states. And at the time that happened, Washington elected to be a combination state, which means we have riparian rights, we have prior appropriation rights, and we have passive water rights. And the legislature put a stipulation in the law that said but it's all government in the United States, we hold the right to have water in trust for the public. So you have to go through a set of rules to get your water. But it also eliminated the part that you were going to hold water rights for future profit. You either used it or you lost it. Now, there were exceptions made to that for PUDs. You can just imagine how it would be if there weren't exceptions. And we're not going to call you speculators, but you are allowed as a PUD to allocate water into the future. We are not. Now, agriculture or any water right user had to do 4 things. Those 4 are, is the water available? Since the water, I'm going to answer the question the best as we, the mouse in my pocket and me can. Since the water is going to, the river travels 3 to 5 miles an hour. And the water that's in that last hour is going to be salt water in less than an hour. So obviously, the water that we're trying to get out of the river is available. Is the application for beneficial use? Beneficial use is automatically calculated in for agriculture and animals. Will granting the application adversely affect water rights? Well, I did some calculation. And
John,
when
you
I-
got about another minute.
I know that, and that's what I
All
said,
right.
Andrew, that it's hard to do this.
Oh, no, I know.
I know. So I'm going to do my very best, and other than that, we'll have to do it over coffee someday.
Come find me for sure.
Okay, so I did some calculations, and the amount of water that agriculture wants, and I thank you every bit of the way in this process for what you're doing. But the agricultural water that we want, if you calculate out the river, is the thickness of a credit card. But say I made mistakes, not 2 times, not 4 times, not 8 times, but maybe 10 times miscalculated. That's 10 credit cards. That's the amount of water that we're using, that we want out of the river. Now, in the middle 90s, when we asked for this water, agriculture was left out. So my father used to say, in the land of the blind, one eye is king. Having said that, we would all be, Tony said it well. Where'd Tony go? I don't know, but
Back to work.
back to work. Well, obviously, if you wouldn't be helping us, we'd be out to lunch if the PUD wasn't helping us. But the water that you've allocated might someday be used by your business and your operation. That leaves us out to lunch. So what I want to say is we're continuing to try and calculate and get our own water right. In the meantime, we thank you for your helping us with that. But in the process of doing that, since it's going to be salt water in less than an hour, and this steamroller that's affecting production costs of agriculture in Skagit County is immense. Hoping that you will consider that cost as administrative only, and the water we use is water that would otherwise not be used.
All right, thanks, John.
Good afternoon, commissioners, and thank you for your time. Sean Holbert, representing Skagit Seed Services today. I think we had quite a few of our landlords and family members and growers reach out to your guys' inboxes. Similar to as Tony said, we're very grateful for the water that we've had the last 3 years. Speaking on the behalf of our growers, we work with over 8 small family farms. There's 5 or 6 or so seed companies doing the same thing that we're doing in Skagit Valley. The highest margin crop is planted the driest time of the year by far. Second week of August to first week of September. Without the reliable transfer of water into that system in District 15, things would be much more challenging for all those family farms. And then on a global scale, speaking for my customers, we work with over 10 international seed companies. When I complete a FIDO for a green cabbage field, on the FIDO, there's over 70 countries associated with that. So the world relies on clean seed production that can occur in Skagit Valley. And we're grateful for the water transfer. And without it, the world would realistically likely be looking for another place to produce quality hybrid vegetable seed and quality potatoes. And it's a needed source of water, especially on a year like this where we're below 50% snowpack. We're making plans 2 years in advance to look for hydrants to irrigate crops. If I can't get that baby seed started in August, the contract's going to be gone. Tony won't rely on seed made in USA. It's a global industry. My customers, they'll leave. It's simple as that. So I appreciate your time.
Great.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you, Commissioners. My name is Laura Claus. I'm the Executive Director for Skagitonians to Preserve Farmland. You heard about some of the challenges that farmers are facing right now, and every day we feel like in the headlines we're reading about more challenges. And a lot of those things are outside of local control. This is discussing something that is within local control. And so it's a unique opportunity to have an influence here, a very positive influence, same as you've done in the past. So we're just here to stand up for that we're supportive of the relationship between agriculture and the PUD and appreciative of what you've done in the past and appreciate your leadership for what you could do going forward. Thank you.
Other comments? See nothing else. If you're online, use the raise your hand function.
Don't see anything.
All right, and we will close the audience comments and move on to old business. George.
All right, thank you, Commissioners. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. I will provide a brief update just in relation to what we've been hearing so far. Just want you to know that we've recently received approval from Department of Ecology for the seasonal change authorizations to Districts 15, 22, and Skagit Valley Farms for the year 2026. Those are applications we submitted a while ago. So each of the irrigators should be hearing from us soon to set up the programs. So that's good news. May 14th is, we're going to be holding public tours of Judy Reservoir and the water treatment plant. And so Kevin opened up the online sign up this morning and it's almost already full. So that's a really popular event and good for our community to go up there and see what's going on at the plant. The Waputa Annual Conference is being held this week, so I'm going to head over there tonight after the meeting. And there's just a reminder, there's a commissioner session tomorrow afternoon. If any of you have time, you have the links in your inbox, I'm sure. And then lastly, you probably noticed a couple of new things as you drove in today. Maybe not Commissioner Miller, you're probably coming in a little quick. Clay Learned has a sign up on the grass on Freeway Drive, so everybody's notified. Our building is open for leasing for the old admin building. And then we do have ourselves 2 new signs, one out on Freeway Drive, one as you come down the parking lot that makes it a lot more obvious that you're coming down here, that the PUD is down here. And so our crews have been working to get power to each of those signs because they're going to be backlit so that you can see them at night. So that should continue on here for the rest of this week probably, but I think those are going to be very helpful. And that's all that I have, unless there's any questions.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you. HR department update.
Good evening, Commissioners. I don't have a lot to talk about this evening. Doesn't mean that we haven't been busy, but you know. So first of all, we'll start with staffing. So we have a couple of new staff since the last update. Cecily Gubutosi was rehired as our records assistant. So she's been a big help to Shannon with a lot of the records projects that we have going on, as well as in other areas as well. Ryan Dennis and Colton Hordick were both hired for our maintenance department. And then we've had several promotions and or transfers. Several of those are in customer service. Jeanette Moody was promoted from a CSR2 to a CSR3. Janelle Klontz was promoted from a CSR1 to a CSR2. Jose Ortiz was promoted from a meter 1 to a meter 2. Same with Jared Steinke. And then Diane Jones went from a CSR1 to a CSR2. And both of the CSR1 to 2 ladies have been here for about a year, so they've made a lot of great progress in a short period of time. All right, and then we have one upcoming retirement that we know about, at least for this year. One of our water treatment plant operators is retiring, so we are looking to fill that position currently. And as always, we're looking ahead for key positions and succession planning. That's becoming more of an issue for us moving forward, because we have a leadership team that many of us are around the same age. And so we're trying to plan ahead for that. So, all right, current staffing, we are looking for a water treatment plant operator, and we are to replace a retiree, and we're wrapping up those interviews this week. Friday is our last one. Hopefully we get a good one. Otherwise, it's back to the beginning on that. And then for the project manager for the engineering department, we are also wrapped up those interviews today. We were fortunate that we had quite a few good qualified applicants for that position, which is unusual because it is kind of a specialty position. So we had the first interviews, and then we decided that we wanted to do kind of a working interview for the second one to make sure that, both the candidates knew what they'd be getting into and what the job would entail. So we took them up to the treatment plant and put them through the paces. So we will hopefully be making a decision on that this week. All right, union bargaining. We have no scheduled union bargaining this year, so small sigh of relief there. However, just something to keep in mind is that due to upcoming changes to PFML requirements with the Employment Security Department, which will be effective January 1st, 2027, we may be looking to revisit our voluntary plan status. I don't know exactly what that means, but we're looking at our options right now because there's going to be a change to how premiums are calculated and what the employer pays versus what the employee pays. So we'll be looking at those options and making decisions. Field contract negotiations will begin again next year, and we are currently working with the union to develop an effective labor management committee. We had one for our field group several years ago before COVID, and then kind of died off. And so part of the agreement with our customer service bargaining process was that we would develop an effective labor management committee. So we're in the process of trying to do that now. All right, and then we have some required training coming up. So we have discrimination and harassment training, which, as you know, is required. For the leadership team, we are doing supplementary training. We're having Peter Altman from Summit Law, who does a great job in presentations, come up and do the leadership training because there's a higher standard expected for supervisors. And then all staff are going to do a webinar, and I viewed the webinar to make sure that it was appropriate for all of our staff. It's also actually another Summit attorney who lives and breathes discrimination and harassment stuff, and it is actually a great webinar for them to view. So we're offering 5 different date and time options. I did send a link to the board members, and you're welcome at the supervisory training. That's highly encouraged, but definitely the webinar. So not able to make one of those dates, please let me know and I can work with you on maybe viewing the webinar at another time. I know, Andrew, I think you're challenging in May, so we can talk about that. So I can help with options if you can't be here in person. All right, and then some large projects coming up. One of the things that we're looking at is simplifying and streamlining our annual evaluation process. We've had this process in place for 8 years now, and I mean, obviously, a process is never just set in stone. We continually work to try to make it, meaningful and effective. And we wanted to encourage dialogue, but the current process can be time consuming. So we're looking at some options there. And then any changes would begin with the 2026 and 27 evaluation year. And then we had a successful RFP process for our benefit program. Alero was reselected, and we are working with them on updating the scope of work to make sure that they provide the best benefit for the cost, and perhaps looking at having them help us with a couple of different areas like succession planning, for example. So we're in the process of looking at that right now. All right, I think that's all I have to talk about, unless you have any questions for me. Okay.
No questions, and that's the best kind.
Yeah, I agree.
We like our HR presentations boring.
Oh, me too,
Well done.
actually.
Yes, we all do.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, so now we will flow into the water rights lease program policy framework discussion. George, are you going to quarterback that?
Yes, I am. Just going to get our screen shares set up. All right, looks like that worked. Okay, yes, I'll be driving for this part of the process. I'll provide some background, and then we'll get into, have some questions for you even before we start, but just to set it up. Mark and Bill are up at the front as well, so as we discuss questions or want to talk about things, if there's things that I'm forgetting or leaving out, I ask them to kind of help interject if that was the case. But the intent today is to have a discussion items to start the development of the framework for a policy for water rights transfers. Last meeting, I'm going to try and pull it up here. We discussed the process, and so this was something that we used to discuss how we were going to come to some decision points. And you know, this process could take some time. We're first focusing on policy development. So before we get into the details of who's eligible, how much will it cost, what are all the contingencies and eligibility rules, we want to first start talking about the policy. So that would be the first phase, and the first step of that is just at a high level to talk about your thoughts and your feedback. The intent is to get feedback from the board. We will also gather information, regulatory information, legal information, operational things that will also help feed the process. We'll have a stakeholder process as well. We'll gather information from our stakeholders. So with those three things, we can start working on a policy. You know, not to get too far ahead of ourselves. It's important to get the information from everybody. All the letters are important. The feedback from the stakeholders are important. There's a lot more stakeholders that we need to talk to. And so this is just one step in gathering all that information to feed the policy. So just any comments about that or clarifications or anything? No? Okay. So yeah, we're just in step one of this policy development. And I came up with a brief schedule that's in the packet as well. And so I'll include that with every meeting packet just so we can see what's going on and what we've done or if the schedule has changed. So that will always be in there. I'm going to zoom ahead a little bit and then back up after this. So one thing that I did include is an executive summary. So the intent of this is to be something that the public can look at and our stakeholders can review. It's meant to be a one-page explanation of what we're trying to accomplish, what has happened already, just, you know, things that we've done and things that we're trying to do. So it's not meant to imply anything or have any decisions in it. It's just the background of what we're doing. And I think I'm going to need it when I talk to stakeholders, or, you know, we're planning to put this on our website on a dedicated page to say, here's what's going on. So it's meant as that reference and background information. So this is in draft form right now. You may have had a chance to look at this, maybe not. If you could please take a look, provide me with any comments that you have, and then we'll work on, you know, getting that ready so that I can use it. It will go up on the webpage as an explanation as well. Another thing that we're working on currently, so we talked about having reference documents and providing some of the background information, things that have already happened. What are all the steps and factors that went into decisions that have already been made? The memorandum of agreement from 1996. There's a lot of things that can build and feed us into working on the policy. It takes a lot of time to gather all these documents. And so we are working on them. This is just the table of contents, so you can see the kinds of things that we're talking about including. These are also documents that our intent is to provide these on a website so that people don't have to go searching for information. It's meant to have everything in one place. So everything related to the 2015 transfer, the 2019 transfer, all of those things, they would be included in there. This is the table of contents as we've come up currently. If you feel like there's things that are also beneficial to have on here, to have as a reference or a resource, please just let me know, and then we can add to it. And then there's that schedule. As I said, I'll just keep updating this, and it only goes out so far in terms of dates, but the phases and the steps are in there. So this will just continue to be updated. Any comments or that so far? Nothing? Okay. All right. So this is meant to be, this is the document. So it's included in the meeting packet. There's 7 questions that I sent the board to start the conversation about the policy and things that could be included. So it's, I got feedback from all of you individually. I've compiled that into a single document. If you're okay, I could just share that document, and then, these boxes won't be blank. It'll include everything that you guys put in there. And then that's what we can use to talk about. So if you're all okay sharing that, then I'll do that. All right. But yeah, we haven't started drafting. I think it's important to set some expectations. We haven't started drafting anything yet. It's important to get the feedback like I discussed, but we'll structure the policy after we gather all that information. I think it's important to have all those perspectives. And just to remind everybody, the policy is meant to be overarching. It's meant to be broad, general, flexible. It's not meant to include details of how the program would be administered or implemented. It's meant to answer the questions of what and why, not how. And so just keep that in mind as we have all of our discussions. Phase 2 of this is the program creation. That'll have details in it. And I'm sure there'll be a lot more discussions during that phase than possibly this phase. So just to provide perspective. But a strong public policy, so that's what we're trying to get to. We want a good, defensible public policy for seasonal transfer of water rights, especially in the Skagit Basin. I think it's less about describing the details of the program, but more about balancing different interests, law, hydrology, economics, stakeholders, those kinds of things. We operate a water system in one of the most tightly regulated counties in Washington, and it's a challenge every day. So that's why our policy, I think, needs to be technically sound, but also legally defensible. We just have to acknowledge those facts. So just a bit of setup there. I will pull up the responses. I'm going to switch documents.
Since that's being shared in an open public meeting, can that also be with the answers added to
The webpage?
agenda for us to be able to refer back to?
Yeah, yes. And it'll be put on the webpage as a reference. All right. So my thought was that showing the responses, each board member can rephrase or explain what you put in. You can rephrase what you have in here, but I think maybe in person you might say or elaborate on what your written comment was. So there's an opportunity here to discuss this as much as we need, and we could have conversation about each of these questions. So just getting to the first one. This is a really broad question, and it's asking the why question. Why are we doing this? Why are we developing a program about seasonal transfer of water rights? It's meant to be open-ended. It's meant to gather your thoughts and opinions, not to solve the problem, but just, at its core, what do you think we should be trying to accomplish here? So Commissioner Lindquist, you provided some comments. If there's a way maybe to summarize what your opinion or view is in a sentence, that might be a good way to approach it. So just position statements, I guess. I don't.
Yeah, I mean, I think the purpose of why we're here is, for me, number one is to support ag. I think as we get further back in there, we threw out some ideas for other uses, but I think the overarching priority number one here is to support the ag community and the irrigators. That's the whole reason we're doing this.
My comment essentially just kind of reverted, or I really dove deep into our past memos and our transfers, and essentially all those memos throughout time and the transfers really embedded deeply into the purpose was to address seasonal ag water transfers due to drought conditions and the in-stream flow rule. So I just essentially took copy and paste from April 9th's memo in 2024, and then other portions of the transfers, just echoing that.
Okay.
Yeah, I probably took a step further back just because my concern is that there are, of course, it's going to cross legal and regulatory constraints that start to raise red flags when we design specific programs around customers or stakeholders. So can we? Yes. Should we? Yes. But it's really important that if we are going to have a lease program, that those classes of users meet the regulatory and the statutory requirements. Not to say, by all means, top shelf is this. And also there's, from a process perspective and from frankly, a legal perspective, we have to evaluate the entirety of the program. If we build a program for ag, we could be hitting some unnecessary speed bumps.
And, sorry.
Go ahead.
I think we're going to end up in other questions. I think addressing each one of the comments that you made just about, risks and eligibility and things like that. So, yeah. Okay. One thing, Commissioner Miller, I just want to highlight one statement that you made in here. Optimize the value of those rights for long-term benefit of all stakeholders. Is that?
Yes.
Is that what you're?
That is exactly
getting
what
at?
that is. Yes.
Can you elaborate?
No, the water right belongs to the PUD, and the long-term benefit would absolutely include the ag users and anyone else that we would choose to lease those. Anybody that we choose to, in this case, would qualify for those rights. If we exclude at the outset, it blows up. So the optimized value for the long-term benefit of stakeholders, including everyone who's at the table, including the ratepayers.
And so the policy would not name, or we shouldn't specify things in the policy about formally naming or establishing priority. Like I think
I don't think
a strong policy would say, would talk about eligibility. We would have to talk about eligibility, and we'll get there. You get to set the eligibility criteria. So at some point in the future, you're going to say, this is what I establish as my priority and my eligibility.
Right. So we establish a class, and if the class is irrigators, we can absolutely prioritize that within the construct of something else to say there are other classes. This is the one that we feel is going to offer the most ecological, economic, and otherwise benefit for our community. And that's why we're making this decision. If you start from the outset, you're just setting it up for legal challenges.
Okay, maybe some next questions might dive a little bit deeper into each of those. So if we talk about that, the next, that might be too, is that zoomed in too far? Can everybody see that? Can I go a little further? Is that okay?
That's great.
Okay. So I think this comes up right off the bat, right? Like who is and what groups are, who should you consider? Actually, so sorry, that's in the future. What should you consider? So cornerstones of policy. So things that we have considered in the past and things that we should have in our policy as things that we need without making decisions on any one of these points. So these are examples of decisions that we need to make when we develop the program. They're listed as examples of things that we will need to talk about. So they are decision points. What kind of decision points do we need to make or need to have in order to get to the program development? So priority of water service. So that's a criteria. You know, I just heard it in discussions right here. That's going to be a discussion point. So we're going to have to establish some priority or eligibility. Is that something that?
I would say that eligibility would supersede priority. Because,
Okay, yeah.
I mean, eligibility is the first filter, and if you say that we find that the most value or add value for our community for beneficial reuse, and our definition of beneficial use in our community is most heavily defined as agricultural purposes, then in that term, the eligibility criteria would then filter down, and then you would have to deal with prioritization within that group.
Sure. Yep.
I think I misunderstood this question. I was more focused on what criteria would we consider to start doing the transfer every year?
I took it the same way, Joe.
So I mean, my
Let's just talk
thinking
about
is-
that. Talk about that.
Yeah, my thinking is we need to have a clear set of metrics on, you know, everything we need in the reservoir by, say, middle of June in order to say, okay, you know, we're ready to go. We've got enough water to run one pump for the next few months.
So that would be an operational constraint.
Operational constraints, yeah.
It's something that we should have in there that we need to define better as part of the program.
Yeah.
Okay. Agreed.
Yeah, a statement of surplus is where this whole thing starts.
Yeah.
That's really, without a surplus, there is no
There's no
transfers. Like that needs to be paramount.
One of the future questions talks about operational considerations, and the intent is to have a deeper dive into that with the board coming up here in the next month or 2 months about all of the operational considerations involved in a transfer. So yes, that is something that as staff, we look at that first, actually, yes. So that is something that should be on that list, correct? Are these other things on this list, things that you would think should be in a policy to consider?
I definitely, I mean, again, I went more in depth into considerations that were in line with those examples provided. Geographic constraints. I just copy and pasted again from the recitals within our transfers. Owns water right on the Skagit River that allows them to divert. So it identifies the location, what type of water right they have, and so on and so forth. And that goes back to the eligibility criteria, I think, discussion.
So what I'm hearing is that geographic constraints is something that we should consider. All the detail and what we've used as prior justification, we will get to, right, as we develop the program and what kind of things we're going to put in there. But geographic constraints is an important factor for us to consider.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of how I made that
it'll become
list.
more, just, I hate the overlayer of the Nooksack adjudication, but it's looming large as I look at this. And so geography is, it's up there too.
And it matters for us because we can only transfer water rights downstream. We have the crossing at the SRD, they have to be downstream. So there are geographic constraints just based on that. But then you could have other geographic constraints just on where the participants might be or located or where the intakes are.
Yes, and we know that's important to
So that's something to
some
consider.
stakeholders.
So it was put on the list as, yes, we should consider this. Participation constraints, so that might get into eligibility versus priority, things like that. That would all be kind of rolled up in there. I think we've talked about constraint of not permanently transferring water rights. So guarantee of availability. That's written into a lot of our transfer interlocals. It's something that we try and repeat.
Interruption of- The section of interruption of service.
Correct.
Where there's always, in an emergency, we have our own.
switch.
Yeah, essentially.
And that kind of floats into that next one, the flexibility and adaptability. That was meant from our perspective, I guess, to be flexible in how and when, if you look at the chart in the packet about Judy Reservoir, yes, and Brian mentioned, we have 3 pumps on. We're getting up high in terms of elevation in Judy Reservoir. That's important. That's an operational consideration. But then, we don't know where it's going to go after that. So the flexibility part of it, something to consider. That flexibility can mean a lot of things, I guess.
Well, what I like about the identifying the flexibility and adaptability is especially from a irrigator perspective, understanding that there is a desire for some measure of consistency and predictability, whereas where we can provide that, we should, but we also are not in a position to promise anything we can't. We don't have a crystal ball.
Right.
We don't know what
Sure.
year to year is going to look like. And so where we can, I feel like we should, and where we can't, or where there's just shared science or unpredictability, we just need to call that out, because I feel like there's a request for something that we can't deliver on, but we being considered of that to be able to say, here's what we can and can't say moving forward. Which also, I think, just to get it out, because I'm thinking about it now, is just those classes. The fact that these are seasonal transfers will eliminate a lot of the potential noise around, ooh, I'd like to get some water. Well, do you realize that it's
Yes.
year to year? Because there's really only a few classes of potential transferees that are going to qualify. I feel like as soon as we get that, the noise is going to cut down, and it'll be
I think
what I'm
this-
hearing we
Simpler
want
discussions.
anyway.
This gets back to the eligibility criteria for the amount of water that we were discussing at this time, because as demonstrated in our previous meeting, the water that we still have right to, that is not what we're discussing right now. Outside of that, George has made discussions with our local tribal community members that we can also partake in transfers that may not fall within our eligibility criteria as those opportunities come available.
Right, as a
So that-
facilitator or willing partner in other transfers that benefit.
But this
the
is
community.
pertaining to this specific
Sure.
amount of water that this
Yes.
program, that's what I
Limited.
really want to emphasize here, is that we're talking about an eligibility criteria in regards to the amount of water that's already been discussed with our tribal member or with our tribal partners. So anything outside of that, I think this gets back to the litigation concerns, is that the fairness lies within the amount of water that we're setting aside for this set of eligibility criteria. The other set of water that we do have available could be, at the discretion of whatever other process we decide to go through on that manner.
That's a good point. So a policy can be written to both of those different kinds of programs. They're just different programs. One is with the amount of water that we're talking about that is in this program. There may be something else that is established, offered, whatever you might have, but the policy could be general and broad enough and flexible enough where we can address both of them and just dive into one program. You can establish multiple programs with a policy.
Yeah. And again, eligibility concerns that we're discussing right now are specific to
The program.
the program.
Correct. Okay, good. Commissioner Miller, you added I brought your response up. You added some additional things in here. So I listed some examples of constraints. I think you added
Yeah, I'm always gonna over lawyer this, so feel
Yeah.
free to delete anything.
You had, so compliance with the MOA, I think is one thing that you added, and then rate setting authority. I don't know if you want to elaborate on those.
That is, I mean, it gets back to what I've stated before is it is my intention to provide this water, again, in this transfer at a rate and an amount that is defensible and makes economic sense for our customers. So that's really what that means, which is code for, I don't want to trip over ourselves and get into too cheap, if you know what I mean. I mean, it has a value. We need to be able to account for that in a way that is both ecologically and economically sensible. So that's what that means.
So it's something to put on the list of constraints to talk about that you'll get to when we
So are you-
develop the program.
Are you diving into more so a concern in regards to saying, we want to be able to provide enough to the customers that we're saying we have this funnel of who we're saying is part of our program. And then we have a set of prioritization and we want to ensure that they are being provided the amount of service that is beneficial to them. Is that what you're saying?
No, I don't really want to police that. I want to be able to say, we have established a class and here's what we're going to charge for it. And that we now have to,
So now you're making a market though.
no. It's within each class. So we can't say, well, a perfect example is we're going to charge WDFW this much and we're going to charge irrigators this much. We can charge different amounts. We just have to defend it. We have to be able to say, here's why WDFW's rate was what it is, and here's why the irrigator's rate is what it is.
So you're saying like, say WDFW, an example, I mean, again, these are two totally different programs.
Right.
Like,
Well,
but
it
just
doesn't have to be. I
going-
mean, they're
going-
both untreated. So I would want to put those in the same policy.
Going back to the, criteria, right? One example could be that WDFW doesn't have their own water right. Correct?
Right.
So that could be one of the reasoning for why their water costs more than someone that already
yes.
has a water right.
And
So
also,
that's, I mean, a
yep.
defensible example.
Yep. And within that, there's also the challenge. I mean, there's legal. Yeah, I don't want to lawyer, but yes,
No, I'm just
right.
saying
Yeah,
that
that's what I'm
that is
saying.
an example.
Right.
This
That is what
class-
I'm bringing forward, that we are being intentional
I
and
think
thoughtful.
that goes back to eligibility and somebody that already has a water right. That they just
Is-
can't
if
have
that's
to use
part of our
the
criteria.
flow.
If
So-
if we build the classes correctly, we don't have to referee every single decision.
Yep.
You hit the class, here's your set of, then it becomes both predictable and auditable, and it's what I think gets us there, and it's within the context of the MOA, because it says we're taking that we take that into consideration, right? That here, as a community, in 96, we agreed this is how it's gonna work. Whether that's working or not, we're using that as a data point to say, this is why we're moving forward in this direction, because there is a class of users within our community who have a need that we can meet. Here's what we're gonna charge them and why.
Yep.
As soon as we have that conversation, we can defend it till we're blue in the face, and I have no problem charging into that, headlong into any challenges. Right, Pete?
Pete, you can feel free to chime in anytime you want. If you get an idea or want to say something.
The only real lawyer in the room.
No, I think you guys are on and around the issue and I agree that we got to be careful and do this in a piecemeal way before we make any proclamations about what's available and what we're going to provide. No, you guys are right on the discussion.
Any additional things besides the ones that I listed? Those are the things that just came out of what we've already been talking about.
No, I exhausted your list, so I win.
Okay. So we will have constraints built into the policy. We'll talk about them in general, and we'll say these are the things that will be considered as we develop programs. And policy is still meant to be flexible as well, flexibility within all of that. Okay. Okay, so this could be, this could be a longer discussion, question, but yeah, I think you guys have already been talking about this.
Mhm.
Who could be eligible? So eligibility will be determined. We're not defining eligibility within the policy. Realistically, the policy could be written around if you're an approved user, if you are eligible, without defining the criteria of what eligibility is. That's one way of approaching it. From there, you could be getting into more detail, which, the more detail we have, the less flexible and adaptable the policy is. And that detail is good in a program. So these are examples. Obviously, the agricultural irrigators are the ones that we've transferred to already. They're obviously the first one you'd think of. Special purpose districts, well, the districts are. Municipalities have asked. Commercial industrial can overlap in different areas. So I guess you could think about who could be eligible without saying that industry or that person.
This is the part where I like, if we just call them classes, right? So there's a class of user, and then we build structure around each one of those classes, and then we can just turn around and say that we can make allocations based on what we feel is in the best interest of the community per class. We can just say, commercial industrial, one that's not on here, state and federal. If there's somebody comes to wildfires or whatever, and they want to pull water out of the river to fight fires, so, okay, let's build for that. But what I like about the classes is it becomes very, as I said before, it becomes very proceduralized, for lack of a better term. Once you're in the irrigator class, you know what's expected. You know how that's going to go. We make a decision to allocate according to the surplus per class, and we can decide 100% this year is going to irrigators based on the other applications. We said there wasn't an application for municipality. We reviewed the commercial and industrial ones, and we find that a 1-year allocation for something is basically not consistent with good governance or policy of that water, and so we're not going to allocate for that.
I don't necessarily agree with doing an annual review of applications.
because
I don't. I
That's
think
why
that's
kind of why we're here is.
Yeah.
You'd have to, though. It's an annual water right transfer.
Yeah,
So we'd
but
have to
I think
evaluate every
everybody,
year
I think everybody kind of agreed that I think a lot of people in the room have kind of said, if we could get a longer term agreement,
here's,
think
here are
everybody's
the
idea of a
classes
longer
and here is
term,
the
but-
analocation for the next 3 to 5 years.
yeah.
That is
something
what
along-
What I'm saying is if you don't do this and a municipality or a industrial user comes in, they will sue us and they will win. Pete?
Because we're not following our policy?
No, because we're not following RCW.
Yeah, that is a concern. I think once you get the classes established, the only real prohibition is treating members of the same class differently, right? So
We couldn't charge John different than Sean.
that's right.
That's what's prohibited, but we can decide we're not going to allocate to commercial.
Yes,
because-
that's my point, is we could
But
say
we-
we're not going to do
But we
that.
have to establish that as a class before we do that. We can't just say this is for irrigators only. We have to give everyone an avenue to apply for the water. If we don't,
I would agree that it needs to be open-ended in that way, and then we can filter out using whatever criteria we have to say whether they're eligible and then whether they're within the priority structure. So
Well, it's-
But that's where I
3-year,
think we're
I
talking
mean-
about two different things. It's like, we're not arguing the fact about needing a set of classes
Right.
that are, potential users.
I just
We're
don't-
arguing what the
I just don't want it to be an annual process.
no.
So we can have that whole discussion.
Yeah, I mean, we're probably getting too into the weeds for this.
Yeah,
one
that
now,
wouldn't
but-
be in the policy. I don't think. Like that wouldn't make it flexible or adaptable enough. It'd be nice to be able to have the option of making the program single year or multi-year or, repeatable or automatically renewed. Those kinds of things we can build into the details of a program. You can have a policy that says eligible users without a definition. You haven't defined what that is. You get the opportunity to define it, But the policy would just say, we're gonna have these constraints, the last question we talked about, we're gonna have geographical, operational, whatever, these constraints with everybody that qualifies for the transfer without defining who's doing that just yet.
And what I'm bringing up is that without allowing an approach for somebody else, it's ripe for litigation. If we build it for discretion, then we get to make the decision. If we build it for a single class, then we're right, then you can't actually do that. And if it's an annual transfer, then you just have to evaluate, here's who wants the water and here's why we're giving it to them. Like, as long as we can show our math, which we're very good at,
Why can't you do that for more than 1 year?
ecology won't let us do it for more than 1 year. I mean, that's the other part where we're setting a policy.
But these are all the details that we
Right.
need to get ecology away, and we need the reference information, the background, but
Well, to transfer a surplus, we don't know what the next year's surplus is gonna be. So that's why would somebody ever take a check? Like, we can't, that's not good governance to make an assurance on something that we don't know what the amount's gonna be.
But you can guarantee who is going to be those that are being serviced by that, or that meet the criteria. Like, this is
If
what
they
we're
meet the
seeing.
criteria.
This is
Yeah,
the
if they're like
criteria that
in the
we're seeing.
class. For sure.
Because ultimately.
But you have to have I think annually you have to evaluate it.
You may not have to do a full-blown annual evaluation of everything, but you need to know how much water you're gonna have, and
That I
changes.
The how
That
much, I think,
changes.
is.
so we
the
would do that
important
every
part.
year, sure.
Yeah,
But
like
the
we've done the
who
last
were,
3 years. I mean,
But if a commercial or municipality wanted water and we didn't have a process for them to approach this lease, it would get weirder quicker.
even if they don't meet eligibility
Well, they
criteria.
would meet, well,
they'd have to meet the.
they'd have to,
eligibility
yeah,
first.
we'd have to
They
build
don't have
those
a water
classes.
right that we built, and they don't have this, and they don't have that.
Right, that's why, as long as we're intentional on how we create the
Right, that's
classes.
the filter that we run anything through. The policy is meant to just grab the big bucket. You know, here's the big bucket of general terms, general considerations, general eligibility. We won't tell you that you get it, how long you get it for, how much it's gonna cost. The policy doesn't define all of those things. A good policy for us would be not to define all those things. The program can define specifically. We've just ran a 3-year program. That was different than the way we ran the once-a-year programs. I can venture to guess that the next time we do it, it might change slightly again, and the one after that might change slightly again. It's important that the policy doesn't corner us into doing it a certain way. It's good to have that flexibility and to have each program change as needed. So I'm looking at this as stepping even just further back. The question was meant to get all this conversation going, of course, but
But
who could be eligible? Whoever you decide is eligible.
okay, so that gets back to my point. So the policy could say, we will be doing transfers for eligible individuals within
It could be very
Whatever
broad.
class.
whatever these classes
It could be
are.
very broad.
As long as,
However, the policy itself can say, this is what eligibility means.
Yeah, and you weed out.
The program would mean, this is what eligibility means.
I would recommend saying the eligibility will be defined in each program.
What do you mean, each program?
You might have more. We
right,
don't
so
know
our
what we could have.
municipalities, we could say we're municipalities that have a junior water right, but are trying to do, development for new housing or something like that. We say, there's no way we're gonna do that. That would be a waste of an allocation. So we could just basically rule that out and say, if you're a municipality and you're coming for a seasonal transfer, here's what you're not gonna get. We can write that in. If for some reason, if it's Burlington needs it for soccer fields, we could say, okay, that starts to make a whole lot more sense than Burlington needs it for a new housing development. Like, well, no, you don't get a seasonal transfer for something like that. So we can just rule that right out. Whereas the municipality is established within that program, we can say, here are the factors that we consider on whether we're going to transfer water to a municipality on an annual transfer. That's the way I look at it is, okay, municipalities bring your needs or special purpose or commercial industrial, and industrial is like, you just can't run your whatever. We're not going to support that economic activity with a valuable resource like this when there are other other suitors or other classes that we feel are better use for this asset.
I think that's what I'm trying to get at, is that we still can state that this is the criteria we use to evaluate. This is the eligibility requirements, and if you do not meet this, then you will not be approved of water transfer. I think that you're arguing in a point that I'm not trying to make. Because I agree, we have a filter. This is yes or no, do you meet these criteria? And we're still being inclusive, but also having sets of criteria within our program that are saying our value, what we value.
Yeah, I'm not tracking. So I think I just don't want to talk past you. So what I'm saying is that we established the classes. No, and by talking past you, I think what you're trying to say, I'm not hearing what you're trying to say. What you're saying is you're using eligibility and I'm using classes.
Yes.
Yes.
That's what I mean.
Yes, you are eligible for a class, I think that's the way that I would put it.
But then at what step would you say that class will or will not be served?
That's where we would come in. We would have our stated policy objectives per class, which is pretty simple. I mean, the irrigators one's super simple, right? It's already been established because we have a proof of concept that explains why we did what we did. All of that math is defensible because we've been working on it for 3 years to be able to say, here's why we transfer this water. And it makes sense. Now, to apply that same logic then to municipalities or special purpose districts or commercial industrial, however that would work, then we would borrow those principles to be able to say yay or nay. Because it's all about being able to show your math. So that's just, there's a pile of eligibility for municipalities that's different from irrigators.
Why would you, I mean, like, if you're requiring that someone already have a water right, you could keep that for any of your little classes. I don't,
Right, yeah, you would have to.
You're not gonna even have anybody at some of these, I mean,
that's where I'm getting confused.
Yeah.
It's like, isn't there eligibility criteria that regardless of who we're discussing is fair criteria?
So yes, well, I think we work backwards from what's legally required for the class. And again, it's for me, that's just set it right early and you avoid the lawsuits down the road. Because they will come when people want water. It's what whiskey's for drinking, water's for fighting. So whereas we're in a position to set the table, we should be very specific about how we set the table. So when the comers come, we're able to say yay or nay ahead of time.
But how would eligibility criteria of having to be required to have a water right that's interruptible be?
I don't know. I don't know.
I guess
Well, what I would say to that is that there is a direct connection between our inclination to help out the ag community in the way that we have over the last 3 years with the in-stream flow rule and their
it gets
interruptible rights.
back to the why we're doing this.
Right, and so the different category of industrial use or something like that, that may have a whole different set of considerations and not the same justification that we might use for the ag community.
As long as
So-
there is one.
That's right. And so, that's why, and it goes back to, let's do this very slowly and carefully so that we don't do what you were warning against, which is exclude people from the beginning in the black letter of the policy that would arise, that would give rise to a potential lawsuit. Versus.
Because that will blow up the one that works as well.
That's right.
They will say, you were not thoughtful in
and
establishing your
That's
policy.
a real risk. That's the
Yeah.
adjudication risk. If this gets blown up and goes to a Nooksack style adjudication, all bets are off and we're in a world of hurt, right?
Right, and so while it is currently unimaginable, right? I mean, that a municipality or commercial may come to us, but we have to build for that anyway.
Yeah, I'm just
Okay, yeah.
thinking about circumstances in which like a water bottle facility would want to come and say, hey, I want some of your
Right,
water.
and we would say that it doesn't meet our need, it doesn't meet our
That's-
criteria for this, right?
That's, I'm trying, yeah,
Okay.
Those are the considerations I'm trying to bring and concerns that I'm trying to bring up.
And then we're gonna go through all this and try and come up with something that you can then read. This isn't in the form of a draft
Right.
policy, right? So, yeah, we'll have to synthesize after we get other information and make sure we understand what you're saying and make sure we understand what you're saying, and then we'll have to discuss it further. But I think I understand what you're saying. I think. We'll have to listen to this again. I think Mark understands. But I think at the root of it, you're kind of basing it at the same level where you have to run through that filter to say, are you agreeing to give these people water? There's criteria and decision-making before anybody gets to that point.
You have to have a junior water right to
Right.
be
So,
eligible for this program. I
Oh,
mean, is that gonna,
to qualify for the class, here's how you get in.
Yeah.
And after you're in, then we still have right, different classes have different rules, and we still have the discretion to allocate or not.
right?
As
Okay,
long as we can
okay.
show the
How is
reason,
that
rationale.
Okay, just because you feel like water bottle facilities aren't good for Skagit County, like, how are you gonna justify the why if they meet the
The
class
exact
requirements?
same,
Like,
the exact same logic that goes into justifying it for irrigators. We just decide that's what's the best for the community. It is exactly the same. We sit here and we listen and we agree. The irrigators, it is in the interest, it's part of our heritage. We want to make it part of our future. It's core, it's central to our quality of life. And so therefore, we're going to make that decision. And that is legally defensible. And then we say, water bottling facility, no. And furthermore, it shouldn't be on ag land anyway, even though you can be.
so I guess the question I'm getting down to is, if there are classes that we won't even entertain, and how does that work too?
yeah, and I wouldn't want to write something like that into a
That's
policy.
also something that's,
Exclusion.
but
in a
that's why I'm
policy would be-
saying if there's a requirement that it serves these purposes within the community, they have this water right. Those are situations in which I feel like those are overarching regardless of what class you in. You can't even enter into these options of classes unless you have this criteria. Like, I feel like that there's like the initial filter and then you fall into these categories. And then you have another filter of yes, no, if there's enough water. Like, that's where I think where I'm confused is like, why can't you have like an initial filtering process before they even go into their own category as just a generic, like, anyone enrolling in this needs to understand it's temporary from these dates, that it's a limited amount and PUD retains the right to do X, Y, and Z. And you must have either a junior water right or a, show productive, whatever those initial things are.
Right, yeah, if you don't qualify the class, you don't even start the conversation.
But I'm saying, like, even before the class, like, even before we have these classes that we're saying, like, why wouldn't
Mark,
there be?
yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, just from the audience. It sounds like you're talking about the same thing. And I think we talked about this originally, like, what does eligibility mean? You know, there's allocation and eligibility. Who are we able to allocate the water to, which might be these classes, and then a sub part of that is eligibility. So, you kind of put the first part of eligibility out there, which would be virtually, almost anybody.
Mhm.
And then you have beneath that, you say, okay, we're going to have this other eligibility criteria within those to pick people off. That way, the first step is, well, we're not going to allocate to anybody but agricultural, because that supports the community and our economic growth here, and we're very reliant on that. And then within the agricultural community, you say, okay, well, if you have a water right, yes. If you don't, no. If it's interruptible or not. It seems like we're like those two. There's almost a need for two eligibility criteria or evaluation.
One before the classes and one once you are within
Yeah,
them.
I would go class and then after, but to get into specifics. So class, then specific. But
And that's something we can try and draft up and
Well, the
let
good
you
news
guys
is that
chew on it.
the good news is that there are benchmarks that we can pull from each of these. That's, we don't have to, that's not whole cloth.
And, you know, Commissioner Hammer, you copied from our resolutions, we did put things in there. So yes, there's stuff that we can, it's a starting point. How do you feel about moving on to the next question?
Oh, please.
Okay. Safeguards. So we talked about this briefly, but there's regulatory, operational, technical considerations, things that we've already considered. So we talked about ecology already. You know, they've got their own filter on approving applications. We just got the ones for this year approved. We've got consideration of stakeholder input, but you know, safeguards I think are critical to a program like this. We need to establish trust, so having some rules I think are going to be important. Stating those, what those are, whether they're filter on eligibility or just safeguards on the program itself and how it's managed. I think those would be helpful. We do have minimum requirements from ecology. There's some things outside of ecology's purview that I think we need to consider as safeguards, and we talked about this already. They're operational things.
And we need to, yeah,
And
we just need
that's-
to keep that out in there everywhere, because we, you know,
Without
we didn't
that,
have pumps for how many months up there, and
It
if
makes
that
it
had
hard.
happened in the spring, there would have been no discussions of seasonal transfers at that
Right.
point, so.
so as far as staff is concerned, this is an important consideration, safeguards. Whether you lump it into safeguards or risk or operational considerations, it's kind of all the same thing, but yeah, we are, if there's one thing that as staff, we think about the most, it's these things. If you look at the reservoir graph from Judy Reservoir that's in our packet, last year, the reservoir got down to an elevation at the end of the transfer season that was not comfortable for us. And so that would be something that we would look at a little bit more closely if we're going to move forward with something. And I'd like to dedicate a meeting just to talk about that. All the considerations involved in decisions that staff makes for turning on the pumps, when they're running, Skagit River water quality. There's a bunch of different considerations. So I think safeguards are important, and I was curious what the board thought about those. I think Mr. Lindquist, you talked about that, the reservoir, having that as a primary consideration. Agree with that. Flexibility and adaptability, is that what you were leaning
Yeah,
on as well?
Yeah, I put on there for PUD operations, interlocal agreement section, interruption of service. So just the statement that in case, like leaving that clause in there in case of an emergency or a drought or what have you, say one of our tanks completely empties out, you know, and we need
There's a line break or something, right?
line break, something, our usage skyrockets for whatever reason. What would you call it sometimes, like force majeure?
Yep.
Anything such as that would be important to
And
include.
they might change. Like they might change from year to year. We might get a low snowpack year, a low rainfall year. There's other things that can happen year to year, which is, I think, came up. You know, we look at how much surplus we have or what condition we're in to do transfers every year. We kind of evaluate it, make decisions about turning on pumps, turning off pumps, the cost of doing that to get the reservoir full. You know, how long we can let it go down for. So those are all safeguards that we obviously like to put into the policy amongst these other things. And something that we would look at.
And I think that's as much as I don't want to say it's painful. As painful as that may be, I think it's important that the stakeholders understand that as well. Because if you're an irrigator and you just, hey, we're going to shut you off and you're about to start planting, you're going to be like that. That's catastrophic, right? And so I have in your operational kill switch and PUD staff, but I'd almost like to write into there that approved by the commission, right? Where it's not a staff decision to do something like that, but
Yeah.
where we would turn around and say, yep, absolutely, that's that. But so it's the transparency and how I do think it's important up front that the entire stakeholder set understand how the sausage is being made. So that when we turn around and say, look, we had to flip the kill switch, you know exactly from the, all classes will understand what went into that. This isn't because we got a little uncomfortable. It's because there was a catastrophic event. And yeah, we don't want you to lose a crop. And also we have statutory requirements to provide safe and reliable water that are being, and I there's no grower that I've talked to this is going to say, no, don't understand why you're turning my water off. I just feel like, I will say, as painful as that may be, that is part of the process, that the irrigators understand what is going into an operational kill switch. Because that's just,
Yeah,
it's
not,
it's
hey,
nuclear.
we just stopped. You're
No,
right.
exactly. We just got a little uncomfortable, or one of the commissioners was a little squishy about something. Let's say, no. All of that staff work goes in so that everybody understands at the outset. I think that's,
Well, it's almost like declaration of emergency, right? Like,
pretty
so,
much,
you
yeah.
know,
I mean,
we're granting George, like taking off the cap of his ability to
That's-
pay. I mean, we have to, there has to be something like that.
I just realized that I wrote PUD staff and I should have said in with approval of commission. Because what I, again, this is me trying to be insurance. I'm not trying to turn something over as as impactful as a kill switch to the staff. Right? I don't think that's necessarily fair to them. We bear the weight of that decision. I think we should, whereas we're creating the process, and I would expect my phone to ring, right?
Well,
And the emails to pour in.
that could be another point of litigation if.
Right, yeah, absolutely. If you didn't understand why it is, and again, from a early and often effort on our part to be transparent about how we're getting you water, what and that's why we're having this. Is why it's painful it may be to sit and watch us make this part of the sausage. I really hope that you can go back to the rest of the community and say, our effort is to be intentional so that we have a defensible process. It's not, certainly, I don't mean to be obstinate or try to throw up walls or anything like that, but that is a perfect example of what I think the commission has to have a finger on the pulse of so that we can discuss that.
I think one factor here is important to understand that it may not be something catastrophic. We build contingencies and factors of safety into a lot of our decisions, especially with the reservoir.
Mhm.
And so, we'll bring the data because it's important for everybody to understand
Right,
the
yes.
things that factor into it. But
For sure.
I still feel like shutting off, I mean, if we were to
No, it's
shut
a big
off
decision,
large
yes.
portion of our current service area, we wouldn't just.
But it also doesn't have to be on off. Like it doesn't just happen overnight. Something catastrophic happens all of a sudden, but there's other things that you can see coming and then you can plan for and you can make adjustments for. So it's just important to know what we've seen historically, what trends there are, trends within the reservoir, trends within the river. We have a lot of information that we'll share and we'll discuss, but a lot of it is you might be able to see the slope of that line as the reservoir is going down and know where it might get to. And there's accommodations that you can make.
And then there's from a program perspective, user updates so that it's not a surprise. You're going to see that 2-3 weeks ahead. So it's like, look, if you're planning on planting here, or it's starting to get uncomfortable on the delivery side.
Yeah,
Yeah, we're gonna have to turn 2 pumps on.
Right,
at some
absolutely. And
point.
so if you can get in earlier, get in earlier. Or if you need to irrigate, then now is the time to do it, because in 2 weeks we might not have it, although we never know what the weather's gonna be like 2 weeks from now. But go ahead, Karen, I stepped on you, I'm sorry.
no, it's okay. Just kind of I was gonna iterate exactly what you were saying. Just being able to, I think the biggest message is ensuring that the commission is kind of at the helm of making sure that, no individual staff or what have you is, making a call without us being well aware and being liable or being held accountable, and making sure that transparent process goes through. Because it is very.
Right. No, it just becomes a shortage protocol, right? Where we feel like we're moving into shortage protocol and that class, those users would know what that means. It can mean weekly updates. It can mean whatever that means, so that they're informed, so that we can mitigate surprises. Because the last thing you want to do is turn on your pump and not have any water.
So the safeguards would be brought up in the policy as things that we would include in
Mhm.
monitor, discuss, report, all those kinds of things.
Okay.
I don't know if there's.
All I do is talk about safeguards.
concepts of, that would make the program work. Concepts, not the process. And so these are examples of things that we've used. So there's, we can talk about the details of all these, but what do you, so application intervals, like how often, how long? Obviously providing public notice is something that would be a concept that we should use, selection of participants, pricing, metering. And then that last bullet maybe talks about things that we just referred to now as adjustment based on water supply conditions. So it's kind of like a evaluation. You can have an agreement, a multi-year agreement, but then it's like every season, I know Mike looks at reservoir level and he has staff that look at all the snowpack, and Bill does that too. So there's like an evaluation of, okay, how do we plan for this? And so those are concepts that we would look at annually, but there's some that just should become a part of the policy. So I don't know if you guys had any feelings about these or other kinds of, Commissioner Miller, you had the longest response in here.
As usual, get paid by the word. I'll tell you the part that I didn't write in here that makes me the most, that I think we're gonna wrestle with is actual allocation within the class. So if districts 15 and 22 each need the same amount of water and there's only X amount of water available, how are we going to decide how much 15 gets and how much 22 gets? What does Tony get? Or that's the part that I'm frankly least excited about hammering out, but we need to do it well and we need to do it up front.
I think I had mentioned in a previous answer, just in regards to prior, this goes back to, you have your, the criteria that needs to be met in order to be considered as part of the program, and then also then the prioritization, right? And something that I had referenced was, working municipal prioritization, and then referenced anyone who is impacting the other like treated service providers in a negative
Right,
manner,
yeah.
like as
Hydrant,
second. I mean,
hydrant.
that's essentially, you look at why.
Yep.
The
Makes perfect
why
sense.
did we bring in Skagit Valley Farms into this
Mhm.
initial pilot program was they were prioritized and as the tester because they were impacting the pressure zone in that area. So
Perfect-
like,
perfect
are
example.
they impacting our, I mean, it's also part of our water policy manual that we're not supposed to have customers that are impacting our treated customers. So
Well, I think that's an important aspect to include in there, but so absolutely.
the amounts, I can't.
Then the amounts is the part I really want us to think about, and I would love benchmarks if they exist. Because this is the one, this is where after we all agree that this is how this much is going to the irrigators, who gets what? That's gonna be the hard part. Let's not decide that tonight.
That's one thing we've talked about internally. We're not producing anything, right? There's a finite amount
Right.
that's available for transfer. So yes, you'll eventually get to the question of
And
where it goes.
yeah, and I'm open to, this is the one that I want to get the emails on, frankly, because this is the hard
Well,
question.
I think this is the question that really is important for like a work session with
Yeah.
that
They're gonna-
group.
they're gonna be able to
They're
dictate
gonna
because
have to
Well,
be able to
but
tell us.
so yeah, and with Pete and with Brian and everybody else in the room that can turn around and say, here's a right and left on how we value it, but it really turns into water sales. And so, and there's a whole host of factors that we can bring to bear on that would incentivize
Well,
that use, which is going to be of greatest
I think it
impact.
could also just be filtered down from how big your water, what your water right is. And
It could be water rate, it could be acreage, it could be value of the crop. I frankly would love, the seed argument is the strongest for me. I would way rather see water going on a seed field than
Yeah, but then you're getting into
Yep,
market. And
but at the
that's-
same time,
that's
we ju-
not,
No,
because again, if you, yeah.
I think I would just want to see it based on who's water right, because if we're gonna preface this on having to have some kind of water right to be part of the program.
Well, we certainly, that
Should
gets,
just be allocated according to your water right, and I don't think we need to try to get.
but what
creative
happens when
that
they all,
way.
what happens when it exceeds? So if we've got, there's 100 units and there's 120 units of available water rights across the eligible
Well, we would
receivers.
apportion them. by
That's
who
what I-
decides on who's right. I mean, I'm not gonna try to value crops
Well-
and to divvy them up that way.
Yeah, there's just a whole bunch of, I guess what I'm saying is there's variables. And if I want to get her,
Keep it simple.
yeah, I agree. And also this is going to be complex. I don't want to, I not trying to make it complex, but in terms of water sales, when we have a fixed amount and everybody wants more and they all have a water right that's bigger than than that which is available. I would love to see it part of the policy up front. Let's do the hard work to get that in there first, rather than that this is not a can that we want to kick.
What portion? The who's prioritized within their
With-
category?
Mhm.
Well, and that's, I
But
did,
really, that's great. If in as much as you can take as much as your water right allows, that's easy.
Well, yeah, but I'm
I
saying
hope
when you,
that that's the case.
you compare everybody's water rights, if there's more demand than what's.
Right,
where
that
everyone
is
gets.
my concern, is what happens if there's only 100 available. And just units wise, like just using units, so 15's got 50, 22's got 50, and Tony's got 50, but there's only 100 available. Who decides who gets what? It's gonna be us. So I want to make that conversation. But I wanna have that conversation now. Not tonight, for crying out loud. I want us to think hard about it
Mhm.
and get a lot of input.
and again, I think that is something that I think a work session and work like with those stakeholders is
That'll be a
critical.
question that
That
gets
is,
asked
that
in
is
the
a
stakeholder
critical, yes.
sure.
questionnaire,
Because if if we get everything else ironed out, we got our policy, we got our program, now we need to have that final step of prioritization.
It just hits the
Policy,
buzz.
program, prioritization, look at all these P's.
It's the buzzsaw in practice, right? So what does
In
it look like?
practice.
What does it look like in practice? When the water rights exceed the available water, then what? Let's think about that.
Well, I think that's a great, if you wouldn't mind, George, like writing down, like, we have certain questions for certain stakeholder groups that would really help focus those discussions in an open forum.
At the
Because
next
I'm-
meeting, you'll get the draft list of questions that we've been working on, and then we
Sure.
can add or subtract or change, and then, yeah.
And if there are adjacent industries that operate similarly, I would love to know what works, not to make stuff up, but if there are limited utility resources out there that also have people that are competing. I mean, I know this is special and we are definitely special, but if there are practices that we can bring to bear, let's borrow them.
I definitely like to just keep, centering around our past practices. RPs, past practices.
Tell you,
Um,
tonight's brought to you by the letter P.
I mean, like we talk about our first stakeholder group, which was the irrigation districts, and then we added a stakeholder who was again impacting our service area. So our ability to do interlocal agreements with other municipalities and other government entities, I feel like that should be definitely taken into consideration. And as far as their amount of service, right? I mean, I know that this gets into some of that, prioritization criteria. Just their service area, like they have multiple customers of their own in theory, right? So is that a reasonable metric, or so just like
Yeah.
things like that?
Yes, no, I absolutely, that's important. And also that we do this in daylight is super important from a transparency perspective. So that nobody can turn around and say, he got water because he knows Corinne, or she got water because she goes to church with Joe, right?
Nope, they were a municipality and per the policy.
That's
they
exactly
get
it, where it's,
sued.
it's 15 got it because of this, 22 get, and then it becomes repeatable and auditable and predictable, right, where we can go in. And I would hope that it would take some of the heat off staff, because then it just becomes part of the process. It becomes we made the decision up front, and then it just becomes staff work instead of staff discretion.
Agreed.
I'm gonna move ahead. I think these last couple of questions, we've already been discussing. I think there's a common theme, I think, around a lot of the questions, priority, eligibility, that comes into it, but then also risk, we've talked about a couple of times. The last two questions were separated, the first one being community risk, and the last one being PUD risk and considerations.
Yeah.
On the community side, I think we brought this up already, just fairness, the perception of fairness and how the water is being allocated. We've got approval complexity, we've got impact to the river, fish habitat, fairness is one of them. We do have, there's admin costs, regardless of the pricing structure, there's cost to administer the program. Sometimes that gets brought up, sometimes it doesn't. It might change. So just, I don't know if I'd call it a risk, but just a consideration of how much it costs. An expectation of future transfers, I think, is an important one. This program, we've talked about it. It's always meant to be temporary and with a priority to our existing customers. And so, the guarantee of transfers it's hard to guarantee something. And so I think that's important to consider, but that's a risk. And it's something we need to keep in mind as we discuss all this every time. So Commissioner Lenkos, you added just being clear. So being clear and transparent on if we have metrics, show what those are. Commissioner Miller, you just said that too, just having this in broad daylight, making sure everybody's aware of how decisions are made. And I think you just added some more detail on each of the bullets that were listed there.
And the one that I would call out here, and this is the greatest community risk, is that participants come to rely on PUD transfers as a permanent solution to structural water scarcity. That is the one that this is it's a Band-Aid, but it's a long-term Band-Aid. And we've got 19 years before we can relitigate the 96 MOA. So if we use this as part of if we say this is a community-based solution to get us through until the next time that we can open up a greater conversation, or then okay, this is us as a community stepping forward using an available resource. That is really important. And I know it's easy to check the box and but culturally, or even relationship wise, you do it enough times. Yes, it's temporary, but when you do it 30 years in a row or 20 years in a row, how temporary, what I mean, it almost starts to,
Well, I
it's
think
temporary because we say it's temporary, but if you do it every year, how long, you know what I mean?
I think it gets back to the why though, right?
Oh.
This gets back to the 1996 MOA was leaving out a very large and very critical portion of our community members. And I think, again, agreeing with you that, this is not a solution. This is a Band-Aid in essence.
Permanent solution to a structural water scarcity, we need one.
Yes.
And the
exactly.
PUD.
This is us acknowledging us.
The PUD is trying to be a part of the interim
Yes.
challenge.
Well, and maybe even that's our statement, our program mission statement.
No,
I
100%.
really don't
Well,
feel like that's a.
Yeah, no, it's not a bad thing. No, I agree. But the reason it's on here on the risk set is setting expectations of future availability. It's one thing to check the box and move on. But if you're a grower and you're working on a 3 to 5 year plan, it's like, well, I got it last year. How come I didn't get this year? It just turns into this is part of,
I think that gets back to, when we get to the details of the program, being able to not necessarily guarantee that you will get this exact amount of water, but guaranteeing that you will be on the list. Like you will be,
Where-
You
yeah.
will be.
Whereas there's a surplus, here's
Here
where
is
you
where
sit.
you are, and
which
we
is the deal.
we can say, maybe that's where the 3 to 5 year aspect or the longer term aspect comes in, is saying, we recognize districts, 22 and 15 as being a priority user based on our criteria, And, so long as, something doesn't catastrophically occur, that the next 3 to 5 years, you're locked into being in that position within. Does that, I mean, does
Yeah,
that
no,
seem
100%, yeah.
defensible? Because we used our filter, we used our categories, and all we're agreeing to
Legally
is
defensible.
we are acknowledging that we have an interlocal stating that you are a part of this program, and here's where you sit on the program.
And
Right.
if everything else is met,
This is where
Right.
you are 3 to 5
Then-
years. You are locked in this position,
Yeah.
so that everything else.
And that's where I go back to, we need to be clear and.
Yep.
Okay, here's what our criteria is.
Setting expectations. Yep.
We'll do it if
That's,
that's
again, that
all
is an
met.
expectation of future availability based on what you bring to the table. Here's.
But maybe that could simplify the annual aspect, right? If we already have identified the who within a 3 to 5 time span, and then it's just a matter of the how much.
Yeah, and it's getting the DOE's sign off.
Yep.
and-
Right.
Just like we have been for the
Exactly.
last
Well,
3 years.
And it was, I had it on there as stated objective, but it really is to establish the PUD as a regional policy leader when it comes to water, right? Because I feel like had a stronger conversation, if a more visionary commission had been sitting at the 96 discussion, we wouldn't be in the position we're in. Someone didn't stand up for the irrigators.
Are you gonna be here for 19 more years? Because we're gonna have
You're
to.
gonna be, I don't know, we'll see. It's too many more seasons like this with tulips that might do me in, but no, I think that's important. It's not stated here, but I do think it's also important that we can establish ourselves as a regional
Well, and that we're,
policy leader in this. And then when the conversations come down, it's like, we have been through this. We've built this skill set and this muscle group to be able to do a hard thing under duress, right? To the benefit of the community. So when the next round comes up, we'll be in a much better position to articulate for what the entire community needs, not just the PUD.
yeah, and we'll be essentially collecting data over the period of time to very much so provide a stronghold for what the community need truly is, and say that we don't even have the capability or capacity to meet that need. And here's how.
yeah, and that gets to that next question. Like, yeah, things will continue to change and our risks and considerations will continue to change. Our demand is increasing. There's other factors involved. And so we talked about a lot of this stuff. We don't need to rehash it, but this is a big consideration, especially for staff. Just, storage buffers, protecting our water rights, even though the MOA is going to come up for renegotiation in 20 years. Those water rights are important to us, and we need to make sure we do everything we can to protect them. Whatever that means. I'm not putting definition to it, but whatever that means. Water quality concerns, I added the bullet of PSE electric rates because, we have in the last couple of years slightly changed our pumping strategies. That comes, we need to calculate what kind of cost comes with that. Is PSE a local partner of ours and the communities? I'd say yes. And so maybe there's something we can talk to them about. If this is intended to be a community benefit, it'd be good to have community partners.
Good point.
Yeah, no, I
So,
agree.
there's other things.
Rebates? Who knows?
Yeah, it costs a lot to operate those pumps at the SRD. Just to start them up, just the monthly cost. And so changing our pumping patterns does change costs. And so Kurt does a great job at optimizing how much we run them and when we should to try and keep the cost down. But changing reservoir strategy will change pumping strategy.
This also goes into our discussion of additional automation at other
Yes, for sure, yep.
streams, right?
And we're looking
I
at,
mean,
yes, exactly.
those are all things that, we should be doing anyways, but this emphasizes, and especially the raising energy rates also is emphasizing that those activities are becoming more and more crucial.
There's a sub list of projects that we know of that, they all cost money, obviously. there's benefit to us, but they're just have been lower priority. And do we really need to go into that? Well, if a program like this exists, then maybe that adjusts our priorities.
This is kind of getting off track, but going back to our last meeting discussing drought 3 point something and drought funding.
3 million.
I didn't know if we had gone forward with like our fill station upgrades that needed to be
We're
done.
working on the application yet.
Or the additional diversion, like if that would be considered for that type of funding.
We already have a quote on the hardware, the
for-
panel
okay.
for the fill station, so we're gonna move ahead with that. The next project to automate would be Munt Creek, and that's not something that we have
Ready.
figured out and planned, so that probably wouldn't go in. But yeah, there's a lot of projects and considerations that we could have, but it's the last question, but as far as staff is concerned, this is our job. This is our primary responsibility, is to serve the customers that we have. We have over 100,000 customers that we're serving. And these are the things that get staff focused on what's going on. There's a big policy to discuss and language and programs. And the first filter, I think, is this. And so we'll talk about these considerations in a meeting. You're going to be gone at the next meeting.
So feel free to make all the decisions.
We have a planned discussion and preparation for the stakeholder meeting. Maybe at the next meeting, we could talk about some of these operational concerns that might fit into this, might just bump things a little bit, but I'll think about that. We probably won't have we won't have anything about this on the agenda for the 12th.
It is really helpful if like slide decks or information can be provided well ahead of time. Like if since especially we have like a lull week coming up, if materials are already available, it would be really great to receive them so that we can come in prepared to have more questions than be taught.
Right.
That would be great.
We try and get them as early as we can. Even just these operational things, it's a lot of data to gather, and when we share it, it's out there. So we like to make sure that it can just stay out there rather than being pulled back and adjusted and have to be edited. So yeah, we'll get it out as early as we can. But I think that this conversation should happen fairly soon, along with the other things that we're talking about.
Okay.
As far as this question is concerned, there were some comments. I think Commissioner Miller, you just kind of reiterated some of the points that were there, and we talked about a lot of these already. Was there one on here that you had additional? No, actually you didn't.
But it's a tiny one, but here, the non-subsidizing of the program. I'm trained in all the dark arts, so I'm just trying to watch out for headlines that are not useful for the program. Skagit PUD subsidizes local agriculture, blah, blah, blah. Not true, not useful, and could be easily hijacked and really steal a lot of energy away. And so that's why where there are parts that we could write in here, it's like transfer pricing should account for these refill costs specific to the PSC.
Right.
We can bring PSC to the table and also with the same conversation and the same community support to be able to say, here are some added costs that are being considered. Or we just say, as part of the transfer program, here's like, while we're figuring out, it's not just an admin cost. There are the costs.
Might be some additional
out of cycles, whatever it is. So that again, we can say, not only is that true, we have crossed every T.
Well, this
dotted
goes
every
back
I.
to the point of the pilot program that we did, was to gather more information to have a better idea of what the future would hold.
Right.
And you can't move forward without having more than 1 year worth of data. So.
No, these last 3 years have given us good data as far as reservoir levels, changing conditions, right? We had a transformer go out one fall that impacted our pumping. Low snowpack this year has made decisions with our pumping. So yeah, there's continual refining of when we make decisions and which ones they are.
Okay. That last one?
You want more?
No.
Come on, Andrew.
I'm good. Still enough oxygen tonight.
This is just, this is to get the
that's great.
conversation going. I think we had a lot of
Appreciate
good
it. Yeah,
conversation.
we don't get to do this enough, so.
I I think everybody was itching to try and get out a lot of these points and make these, so we'll synthesize this, we'll continue on our plan as far as working towards a policy. So I wanted to keep this meeting going, just so we didn't have to come back to this later, so that's why we're ending a little bit late.
If we do push out the schedule for stakeholder, will you make sure that we get at least that information out as early as possible? Because I know a lot of like being able to ensure as many
plan out,
stakeholders.
yes.
Because I mean, people are already paying attention to the current schedule. So as long
Sure.
as we can really just make sure that we're being transparent and not changing that portion especially. And if we are just being really vocal about it.
Yes, I already have it read about potential change, so yeah, we're keeping notes on this as we go. But yeah, I think if there's, you know, opinions, concerns, I think the most we can do and the best we can do is to be here talking about it at every meeting, not making decisions outside of the meetings. I think that's all really important. Transparency, I think, is going to be our best weapon as far as, you know, other considerations or opinions that are made. But we can't stop those if that's the case either.
Okay.
So I appreciate everybody's
Yeah.
feedback and information. And yeah, this is just the start, so we'll continue on this.
Okay, thank you, George.
And I'm interested in feedback on that executive summary that we can share with people, because once we start getting stakeholders engaged, I want to be able to send them something that they have. And then what else was on there? Oh, the table of
List,
contents. Yeah.
There's a couple, I think, they'll, yeah.
Yeah. Just let me know. Just send me an email and make sure we include those.
And will the table of contents that ends up coming out, will it have like hyperlinks to the actual documents? Okay.
Yep.
Great.
Good.
Awesome.
Kevin's going to make that happen. Right, Kevin?
Thanks,
All
Kevin.
right, well, that wraps up our old business. We don't have any new business. Appreciate everything in the information packet there. Any additional commissioner comments?
No, I just really appreciate the conversations we get to have up here, and, you know, although they're difficult and, you know, complicated, but they're necessary and critical. So I
Yeah.
appreciate getting to work with you guys and George and staff on moving forward with this.
Definitely appreciate your candor and kindness as we work through this, everyone. So we will wrap up at 6:33.